Hello to the good people at the liveactionanime.org forums. I am Thrash Till Death, and this is the newest installment of the Thrasher's Word. You may have noticed that I am now no longer words on a screen, but I am in fact a face and a voice talking to you from a YouTube video player. And there's a reason for this. The thing is, I've been writing this column called the Thrasher's Word for quite a while now. Few months, and if Microsoft Word's word count is to be believed, then I've written the better part of 30,000 words. But this endeavour has engendered a certain amount of cynicism in me due to the fact that nobody fucking reads it. So I looked at what Oak and Volchok have been doing recently. Good work there, guys. I appreciate what you're doing, and I figured I'd rip it off. Follow your fine example. So, here I am. This is the YouTube generation, and I figure people need more than words nowadays. They need a voice to put those words to, and a face to put to that voice. So, here I am. You can bask in the glorious effulgence of my presence for 5 or 10 minutes. But while you're doing that, I might as well review something. So, this is Sky Blue. It's a Korean film by Moon Sang-kim, released in 2003, and I know it's not strictly an anime, being a Korean film, but it owes enough influence to Japanese anime to fill the criteria I need to review anything. That and being, a dystopian sci-fi epic, which I all know I love. So, yeah. It was released in 2003 after a 7-year production process. Now, to put that in perspective, that's big. That's longer than even Akira's legendary production process. And as a result, yes, it looks good. It's a technical stunner, but it's not, for being 7 years in the making, it's not the revelation that you might expect from something like this. It's not technically superior to the Appleseed films or anything like that, and it's definitely not aesthetically superior to anything like, say, Makoto Shinkai's been coming out with in the last few years, or Studio Gonzo for that matter. But it looks good. You have to give it that. It's set in a dystopian future in the year 2142 AD. Not that that date means anything, you know how I fucking hate arbitrary sci-fi dates. And the idea is that most of humanity has been wiped out, as usual when something bad happens in an anime like this, by a terrible toxic rain, as it is named in the opening monologue. And most of the survivors have banded together in this newly built biological city called Ekoban, and the other remainders of humanity, have clustered outside the gates of Ekoban, and they are the ones who keep it fed in return for the food and water necessary to keep them alive and not die because of the toxic rain. And the citizens of Ekoban and the diggers, as they get termed, don't have the best of relationships. Because the diggers basically get treated like shit. They get poisoned by all the mercury and the sulfur that Ekoban pumps out. But both parties are codependent on each other, so a kind of status quo has been formed. So we're introduced to our protagonist by the name of Shua. That's S-H-U-A. As sci-fi names go, it's not a bad one, I guess. I don't know. It's better than Dunan Newt, whatever the fuck that means. And the idea is he was born a citizen of Ekoban, but he was sent into exile after he allegedly killed someone. And in the intervening years he's joined a rebel group among the diggers, working to bring Echoban down. And at the film's beginning, this is exactly what we see him doing. We see him infiltrating Echoban during a party in this funky Tengu mask, and he, hacks the Dolores system that powers whatever it is that Echoban does, and he runs away with the information needed to do something. And while he's in the process of escaping, he comes across this woman, Jay, now working for the security forces of Echoban, who he had a crush on when he was there in his adolescence. And all the old passions are stirred in him and everything, but the thing is that Jay is now living together with the guy who framed him for the murder he supposedly committed. And so you've got the setup for a good love triangle. As dystopian sci-fi goes, this is a pretty solid film, I think. It's not strictly an action film, though you might think so, given the sort of company it keeps. It got called the Akira of the 21st century by Empire, but don't take that to heart necessarily, because a lot of the sequences in it are quite slow and meditative, and you get a lot of establishing shots of the scenery, lots of stuff about just slow shots of windmills slowly starting to spin in the radioactive wind. It's all quite pretty, and I like that. It's taking the time to build an aesthetic and build a world that our characters inhabit, and it is quite an accomplished film aesthetically. It looks good. As in terms of plot, the closest thing I could compare it to would be Macross Plus, in that its aspirations are all quite operatic. It has some quite operatic affectations, in that the three characters, the central love triangle, are all painted in fairly broad melodramatic strokes. They're all dealing with extremes of love and hate, much like in Macross Plus. And, that's fine up to a point. Macross Plus pulled it off better, I think, simply because it was an OVA. It had more time to sort of develop their characters' nuances. And Sky Blue, it sort of comes across like the characters are being portrayed too broadly, not really nuanced enough. But it's saved up to a point by the fact that it has a lot of secondary characters, and they're the ones that make the story come alive to me. In particular, the wee kid that Shua adopts, the orphan, called Woody. And this is the point where you realise that the Koreans and the Japanese must have a very different sense of humour, because Woody's not annoying, whereas he would just drive me up the fucking wall if he was being portrayed in an anime. And another one is the sort of gang member known as Goliath, and he's quite endearing, strangely. He's portrayed to us as this tough guy, but yeah, you get the impression over the course of the film that he's actually quite a sentimentalist, and I like that. I like how you get sentimentality in this film where you wouldn't ordinarily see it. The action sequences that there are superb. The latter half of the film is peppered with all these sort of gunfights, and generally they're very well animated. They're quite brutal. It's something that you might expect to see from maybe Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, but on a bigger budget. And you've also got these sort of spectacular sequences of Shua flying over Echoban in his glider, and all really glorious to look at as he's being chased by the security forces and all that. Really good cyberpunk stuff going on there. Altogether, Sky Blue story-wise is unremarkable. It's solid, but it's unremarkable. It's a good dystopian sci-fi, but it's not a patch on Akira or Ghost in the Shell or anything like that. It's not the Akira of the 21st century. Nothing is the Akira of the 21st century as far as I'm concerned. That film's untouchable. Not even Steamboy. But yeah, it's very good, very serviceable. It says good things about the Korean film industry moving into animation. and I like it. I mentioned this in the Origin Spirits of the Past review, but I reckon this is the way that film should have been. And yeah, good cracking adventure yarn that I'd advise you to go and see if you haven't already. On the usual 4-star scale, I reckon this is a 3, but that equates to very good. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this first video review from me, Thrashed All Death. The glacial personality I'm sure you'll all come to love. And this is me signing off. Goodbye.